Hey, Allison Verhalen here with AV Writing Services, and today we are talking about the future of blogging. What is it going to look like in 2021, which seems more difficult than ever right now because 2020 was so unpredictable. None of us could have anticipated all of the things that were going to go down this year. So trying to predict another year feels a little presumptuous, challenging, to say the least. But I do think, online marketing in a lot of ways stayed the same. I made a lot of predictions last year for 2020, and I think the only one that really did not come to fruition was mobile devices. As I said, a lot of people were using mobile devices more and more and more, so you really had to make sure that your blog looked great on a mobile device. Well, with the shutdown and everyone staying home, mobile device usage actually went down for the first time in I don't even know how many years. So there are these things that you can't predict, but we're going to talk about looking forward to 2021 and some of the things that I think are going to stay the same and some of the things that I think we'll see more of in 2021. So first up is voice search, which actually I can't believe I did not mention this in my predictions for 2020 because it seems so obvious and so important, and it is really gaining prominence in the market share, probably now more than ever because so many people have home devices. They've got Google Home, they've got Alexa, they're using these devices more and more now that they're staying home. So voice search is huge, and that means that marketers and blog writers need to take that into account when we're creating our blog posts. Someone who looks for something on Google, if they're typing it into a search bar, they're more likely to just type in the nouns and maybe a few verbs of what they need. They're less likely to use those smaller words, the prepositions and conjunctions, unless they're really important to the meaning of the question. Well, if they're verbally asking a question of something like Google Home or Alexa, they're much more likely to use full sentences. And that's going to change your keyword usage and the keywords that you should be putting in your content so that Google can match you up with people who are looking for what you offer. And it's really a no-brainer, I think, but I do think it bears mentioning just because, like I said, voice search is gaining in prominence. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger. It's been gaining prominence exponentially over the past few years. So I predict that will continue in 2021. But again, we should always, keywords are important, obviously, but at the end of the day, you're writing for your customers. You're for real people who are actually going to read this content, not just for an algorithm. If you just write the keywords in the way that people type them into the search bar, you might show up in searches, you might not, because Google is getting better at identifying high quality content. They still have a ways to go, but they're getting better. But at the end of the day, it's got to draw in those people who are actually looking at your blog post. And if you don't have any prepositions or conjunctions in your content, it's going to look like really bad writing and it's not going to convert any leads. So always, the algorithm is important. There's a reason I talk about SEO and Google's algorithm all the time, but at the end of the day, it's all about what your customer wants from you. And Google is getting better and better at figuring out what people want and how to match the stuff they're looking for with the people who are looking for it. So, speaking of which, relevance. Relevance is huge. And that's part of Google's thing. It's been part of their thing for, I think, more than a year now, and I'm guessing it's only going to continue to get even bigger in 2021, right? Google wants to make sure not only that your content is relevant, that you're making sure that you're answering the questions that your customers are asking, you're putting the content in front of them where they're already hanging out online, but are you an authority in your industry? We saw the EAT standards, EAT, that Google brought up. I think they introduced it actually in 2019, but that's something huge that really has taken prominence and is continuing to be a really big deal in 2020, and I'm sure will continue in 2021 is, are you an expert in your industry? Are you authoritative? Are you trustworthy? Do people trust your knowledge and expertise? How can you prove that, right? It's all about proving that to Google so that when you write content on any topic, Google's going to point those people your direction because you've proven that you are an expert in that particular industry, that you are authoritative on that topic. So prove it, get out there and get those credentials, put them up on your website, get those backlinks, because those backlinks, the links back to your website from other websites, mentions on other websites, those are all super important to get that social proof. That is important, again, for Google, but also for your readers. The people who actually find your site are going to want to make sure that you actually know what you're talking about. And yes, they're going to go to your blog, but they're also going to check out your about page. And they're going to want to make sure that you really know what you're talking about and that you have the credentials, especially if you're in a your money or your life kind of industry. If you're in a healthcare industry or financial services, those are big ones. Google wants to be really careful, for obvious reasons, about the kind of content that it points people towards when they're searching for answers on something specific. So it's important for all of us, but it's especially important if you're in any kind of healthcare or nutrition industry or exercise, or again, financial services, financial planning, all of those. You really have to show that you really know what you're talking about and that Google can trust the content you're providing so that its users can trust the content you are providing. Along with that, my next tip, they're kind of related, is that SEO is getting more complicated in 2021, right? Google, as I've said again and again, is constantly updating its algorithm. Every few months we have a major update, and that's when people see big swings in their traffic. But we also know that Google is updating their algorithm literally multiple times per day. It's constantly happening. They're constantly trying to find better ways of matching people with the content they're looking for. So stay up to date on the metadata, the headlines, the keywords, the backlinks. All of those things they're already super important, and they are going to continue to be even more important. So absolutely keep that in mind when you're creating content. And then we've got potentially in 2021, we might have SEO not without Google. Google's not going anywhere, but Google might not be allowed to monopolize the online search and online advertising industry anymore. Starting in 2021, they recently got hit by a massive antitrust lawsuit from the U.S. Department of Justice. Basically, the DOJ said that Google is a monopoly and it's not fair to competitors. It's not fair to the market. It allows Google to set prices for online advertising artificially high. Again, allegedly, this is all allegedly. Nothing has been decided with this case yet, so we don't know. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe Google will successfully argue their side and emerge victorious, or maybe the DOJ will make them come down a few pegs, and then we might see the prominence of other search engines, and then SEO won't be all about Google anymore. So that's a whole interesting topic that I think is fascinating, and there's a lot to cover there, but I already covered it in a whole other blog post and a whole other video. So you can either look through my videos for that, or you can go to my blog on avwritingservices.com. It's near the top because I covered it recently. So then we've got the ideal blog post length in 2021, right? So the average length for the blog posts showing up on the first page of Google as of 2020, the beginning of 2020, was, I think, 1,760 words, give or take. And now that length is at the bottom of the blog posts that are showing. That's the low end of blog posts that are showing up. Now the average, or I should say the mean length, if you're a math person and you want to get technical, I know average gets used as mean, but it really means mean. The mean is more like 2,300 words per blog post. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot, or I think it's 2,030 blog. It's around 2,000 words is an average of the blog posts that are showing up on the first page of Google. Google assumes if you're really writing a lot about a particular topic, that it's really in depth. You're not just skimming the surface. You're really looking to educate your customers about that. So it's, on average, it tends to bump up. If there are two blog posts, let's say, about a similar topic and they cover it in a similar fashion, but one is longer than the other, the longer one is more likely to show up on the first page of Google over the shorter piece of content. Google assumes that longer content is more valuable. It's kind of a silly assumption because it depends on your industry and the topic you're covering and what your audience wants from you. I know it's crazy, but again, Google is master, at least for now. So we have to play by its rules. So write the really long content when you can. That said, again, I say this again and again, and I'm gonna say it at least one more time, quality over quantity. Don't fill your blog posts with fluff just to reach an arbitrary word count. If you can only write 15 words on a topic, I think my blog post on this was only like 1,500 words. That's really all I had to say on this topic. I'm not gonna force myself to write more stuff that isn't relevant or repeat myself and compete with myself for the same keywords just to reach an arbitrary word count. I'm not gonna do that. I do try to write the long blog posts when I can and really get in depth when there's something that's worth getting really deep into a topic, but I'm not gonna force it. So don't stress it. Know that that's the average. Know that the 2,000 word and up blog posts do perform really well, but if you can't do it, don't stress it. Just write great content, make sure it's relevant to your audience, put it out there, distribute it on social media and your newsletter, blah, blah, blah. So next up, kind of along those same lines, is reeling in your customers, right? So showing up on the first page of Google, let's assume you managed to do that. You're on the first page. Awesome. What's going to get people to click on your website? Because if you're on the first page, yes, that's great, but you're still only one link on a whole page of options. So what is your heading? What is your subheading? What are your subheadings like? Are they showing up in Google's feature snippets? Because that's huge. If you got a snippet on the first page of Google, people are much more likely to click on that snippet. So get the right subheadings, get great content in there, get the right keywords in there so that you can get that snippet. And even if you can't, at least make sure that your description is on point. Your description is just a few lines that shows up underneath your heading to make sure to really give people an idea of what's in there so that it hopefully encourages them to click through and read your blog post. If you don't, actively go in there and make sure that your excerpt is whatever you want it to be, that it's really powerful. Google will just randomly pick some content and put it underneath your headline, and it may or may not be relevant to what people are searching for. So be proactive about that and make sure that the excerpt that is showing up in Google is really relevant to your target audience. So that is something to keep in mind. And so, yeah. Oh, finally, call to action. That is the last one. That is super important, and yet people still miss it. They put up something that leads to a contact page or asks people to email them right away, which is fine if it's a super salesy blog post. Again, your blog post should not be super salesy. You can break that rule every once in a while. If you've got a promotion or a new product or service, that's fine. But for the most part, you really want to provide value in your blog posts. And if that's the case, if people are coming to your blog to learn a little bit of information, they're not necessarily ready to buy right now, especially if they're in a B2B industry, if you're in a B2B industry or a professional services industry, like, again, healthcare, financial services, an attorney. Those are the kinds of things where people really need a lot of buy-in before they're ready to become customers. So that call to action to get them directly to reach out to you, they're not always ready to do that, but they might be willing to give their email address or follow you on social media, and that way you can keep pushing great content in front of them. And so that when they are ready to buy, you'll be the first one they think of, or if they know someone who's ready to buy, you'll be top of mind. That is golden. So absolutely take advantage of those opportunities. And if it is one of your more salesy blog posts, lead them to a sales page, not a contact page. Don't ask them to reach out to you. They might not yet be ready to do that, but lead them to a sales page so they can read more about that particular product or service before they finally decide to take the leap and become customers. So that's it. That's what I think is going to happen in 2021. Let me know what you think. You can comment on this video here on YouTube. You can reach out to me. My website is avwritingservices.com. You can reach me directly at info@avwritingservices.com. Thanks so much. Have a great week and happy blogging.